Welcome back to AI Analysis. Today we're taking a deep dive into the Lancet March 2nd, 2024, issue 10429. You can find links to the full articles in the description below. I'm Stanley, your guide to the world of medicine and global health.
And I'm Agatha here to help break down some of the most important findings.
Get ready for a fascinating journey through the latest medical research. First up, we have an article that caught my attention right away. It's about preventing rheumatoid arthritis, a condition that affects the joints and causes a lot of pain and stiffness.
This article reports on a study to see if a new drug called abatacept could stop people from developing rheumatoid arthritis in the first place.
That's a big deal because once someone has rheumatoid arthritis, there's no cure, right?
That's right. Currently, treatments focus on managing the symptoms and slowing down the progression of the disease. But this study offers a glimmer of hope for actual prevention. The researchers Andrew P. Cope, Mariana Jesnikova, Joanna C. Vasconcelos, and their team enrolled over 200 people who were showing early signs of rheumatoid arthritis.
So they weren't diagnosed with the disease yet, but they were at high risk.
Exactly. They divided these people into two groups. One group got weekly injections of the drug abatacept for a year, while the other group received a placebo, which is basically a dummy injection with no active medicine.
Okay, so a classic clinical trial setup.
Yeah.
What happened? Did the drug work?
The results were quite promising. The people who received abatacept were less likely to develop rheumatoid arthritis during that year of treatment. And here's a really exciting part. This protective effect continued even after they stopped taking the drug.
Wow, that's impressive. So could this be the key to preventing rheumatoid arthritis altogether?
It's definitely a huge step in the right direction, but we need to be cautious. Longer studies are needed to confirm whether abatacept truly prevents the disease in the long term or just delays its onset.
That makes sense. We need to see the long-term effects and make sure it's safe before getting too excited, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Now let's switch gears and talk about something we all deal with: blood pressure. We have two letters in this issue that respond to a previous study published in The Lancet about blood pressure and the risk of dying.
These letters bring up some interesting points that could change how we think about monitoring blood pressure. The first letter, by Wei Lu and their colleagues, highlights the importance of sleep.
Sleep. How does that tie into blood pressure?
They argue that when doctors measure blood pressure at night, they need to consider how much sleep the person has gotten and when they slept. These factors could actually influence the blood pressure readings and might explain why some people have higher blood pressure at night.
So a restless night could skew the results. That's interesting. The second letter, by Miguel A. Martinez Garcia and their team, brings up another factor: obstructive sleep apnea.
Yes, they suggest that this sleep disorder, where breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep, could be a hidden reason why some people have high blood pressure at night and a higher risk of dying.
So they're saying that maybe it's not just the high blood pressure itself, but an underlying sleep problem that's the real culprit?
That's the idea they're putting forward. They urge doctors to screen for sleep apnea, especially in patients with high blood pressure at night.
It seems like we need to pay more attention to sleep when we're talking about heart health. Of course, the authors of the original study responded to these letters, right? I'm curious to hear their take on these new perspectives.
They did. Alejandro de la Sierra and their colleagues addressed both points, acknowledging that obstructive sleep apnea could be a factor. However, they cautioned against attributing the link between high nighttime blood pressure and mortality solely to sleep apnea. They believe it's too early to jump to that conclusion.
So they're saying, hold on, let's not oversimplify things. What other explanations did they offer?
They pointed out that nighttime blood pressure readings are generally more stable because people are resting and lying down. Daytime readings can fluctuate more due to physical activity and stress.
That makes sense. Your environment definitely affects your blood pressure.
They also highlighted that high nighttime blood pressure could be a sign of other health problems like diabetes or kidney disease, which themselves increase the risk of dying.
So it's about looking at the whole picture, not just focusing on blood pressure in isolation. And what about sleep duration? Did they address that concern?
Yes, they mentioned that they did analyze sleep duration in their original study, and it didn't significantly change their findings. So while sleep is important, they believe other factors are likely more influential when it comes to nighttime blood pressure and mortality risk. Now let's shift our focus to a topic that's been in the news a lot lately: the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This issue of The Lancet features a powerful piece by Michal Eskan and Aluta Continua.
What's the focus of this article?
They raise serious concerns about the dehumanization of Palestinians and the silencing of healthcare professionals and academics who dare to speak out against the injustices they witness.
That's a heavy topic. Can you give us some more context?
The authors bring up the tragic case of Dr. Abu Najila, a doctor with Doctors Without Borders who was killed in Gaza. They use his story to highlight the dedication of healthcare workers who risk their lives to provide care in conflict zones.
It's a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict.
The authors also criticize what they see as a dangerous trend, the use of language by certain Israeli officials that dehumanizes Palestinians, making it easier to justify violence against them.
That's a disturbing accusation.
Ah.
Do they offer any solutions or calls to action?
They challenge the global health community to break its silence and speak out more forcefully against these injustices. They argue that healthcare professionals and academics have a moral obligation to use their voices to advocate for human rights and the well-being of all people, regardless of their background or political affiliations.
It's a call for courage and ethical responsibility. This theme of challenges faced by Palestinians continues in the next correspondence by Samaya Al-Baisi titled The Impossible Mission to Save and Support Science in Gaza.
This piece shines a light on the struggles of Palestinian scientists, particularly those working in Gaza, where conflict and limited resources have crippled the scientific community.
What are some of the specific challenges they face?
Al-Baisi talks about the destruction of universities and research facilities, the loss of essential equipment, and the constant fear of violence. She describes instances where faculty, students, and even their families have been killed or injured. It's a heartbreaking reality.
It's hard to imagine doing science under such conditions. What does the author propose as a way forward?
She calls for urgent action from the global scientific community. She urges organizations and individuals to recognize the potential of Palestinian scientists and provide them with the support they need to rebuild their research infrastructure and continue their work.
It's a powerful plea for solidarity and a reminder that science can flourish even in the most challenging circumstances if we provide the necessary support. Switching gears to a different but equally crucial area, let's talk about maternal and child health. This issue features an article titled Monoclonal RHD Prophylaxis, High Time to Evaluate Efficacy by EJT Verwaj, Abera Kane, Tura Tedesigur, and others.
This article delves into the world of preventing a condition called Rh disease, which can occur during pregnancy and pose a serious risk to the baby.
For those of us who aren't familiar with this condition, can you explain what Rh disease is and why preventing it is so important?
Of course. So our blood comes in different types, and one of the ways we classify it is based on something called the Rh factor. You can be either Rh positive or Rh negative. Now, if a pregnant woman is Rh negative and her baby is Rh positive, there's potential for trouble.
What kind of trouble?
If the mother's blood comes into contact with the baby's blood, which can happen during pregnancy or childbirth, her body might see the baby's Rh positive blood as foreign and start producing antibodies against it.
Antibodies are like our body's defense system, right?
Exactly. But in this case, those antibodies can cross the placenta and attack the baby's red blood cells, leading to a condition called Rh disease. This can cause anemia, jaundice, and in severe cases, brain damage or even death for the baby.
That sounds really scary. But you said there's a way to prevent this?
Yes, thankfully. Doctors can give the mother injections of a special medication called Rh immunoglobulin, or RHIG for short. This medication basically tricks the mother's immune system into not producing those harmful antibodies.
So it's like a protective shield for the baby.
That's a great way to put it. Now, this article raises concerns about a specific type of RHIG called monoclonal RHD immunoglobulin, which is being used in many African countries.
What's the issue with this particular type?
The authors point out that it's being used widely, but there's limited research on how well it actually works. They're calling for more rigorous studies to evaluate its effectiveness before we rely on it as a primary prevention strategy.
It's like they're saying, let's not put all our eggs in one basket until we're sure it's a safe and effective option.
Exactly. They emphasize that while having an unlimited supply of this monoclonal RHD immunoglobulin would be a game changer, especially considering the global shortage of the traditional RHIG, we need to prioritize safety and efficacy above all else.
Makes sense. We can't compromise on protecting mothers and babies. Now, speaking of safety, the next letter raises concerns about a device used to monitor heart failure patients.
Yes, this letter focuses on the CardioMEMS system, a device that allows doctors to remotely monitor the heart function of patients with heart failure. The authors, led by John Kikowin, noticed some discrepancies in the safety reports for this device.
Discrepancies? What do you mean?
There have been two major trials studying the CardioMEMS system, the Monitor HF trial and the Guide HF trial. The Monitor HF trial reported a very low rate of complications, while the Guide HF trial found a much higher rate of adverse events or problems associated with the device.
That's a big difference. It's understandable why they're concerned.
Exactly. They're urging the researchers involved in the Monitor HF trial to release more detailed information about their safety data, to explain this difference and help doctors make informed decisions about using the device with their patients.
Transparency is so important, especially when it comes to medical devices. Patients and doctors need to have all the information to weigh the potential benefits and risks. Finally, we have a commentary from Richard Horton, the editor of The Lancet, titled, "Offline, Science is Not a Luxury." It's always interesting to hear his perspective on global health issues.
In this commentary, Horton reflects on the role of research in shaping global health policies. He revisits a statement made back in 2004, the Mexico Statement on Health Research, which emphasized the importance of using research to improve health outcomes.
So he's looking back to see how far we've come since then.
That's right. He praises the progress made in implementation science, which focuses on putting research findings into practice. But he also criticizes the scientific community for its biases and the tendency to leave research out of important policy discussions.
He's saying that science should have a seat at the table when we're making decisions about health.
Exactly. He argues that we often see science as a luxury, something we can only afford when everything else is running smoothly. But he believes it should be seen as a necessity, a fundamental tool for tackling the world's biggest health challenges. He urges policymakers to put knowledge driven by rigorous scientific research at the heart of their decisions.
It's a powerful message. Science isn't just about labs and experiments. It's about using knowledge to improve lives. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
It's been a whirlwind tour, and there's still more to come. We'll be back in part 2 to explore more fascinating articles from this issue. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.
Welcome back to our deep dive into The Lancet. We're picking up right where we left off with a fascinating look at how artificial intelligence is changing healthcare.
This next article, Machine Learning in Healthcare, Promises, Pitfalls, and Paths Forward, by Ben Glocker and his team, really digs into the potential and the challenges of using AI in medicine.
AI in healthcare has been getting a lot of attention lately. What are some of the promises this article highlights?
One major promise is improving diagnosis. Think of AI algorithms analyzing medical images, like X-rays or scans, to detect diseases earlier and more accurately than humans can.
That sounds incredible. Early detection is so important for so many conditions.
Absolutely. And beyond diagnosis, AI can personalize treatment plans. Imagine an AI system analyzing a patient's genetic information, lifestyle, and medical history to create a custom treatment strategy.
It's like having a personalized health advisor powered by cutting-edge technology. What's not to love?
Well, there's some potential pitfalls, too. One major concern is bias. AI algorithms are trained on data, and if that data is biased, the algorithm will also be biased, which could lead to unfair or inaccurate outcomes for certain groups of patients.
That makes sense. We need to ensure that AI in healthcare is equitable and benefits everyone, not just certain populations. Are there any other challenges?
Another challenge is the lack of transparency in some AI systems. It's often difficult to understand how an AI algorithm arrived at its decision, which can make it hard for doctors to trust and use those decisions effectively.
So there are both ethical and practical challenges that need to be addressed. What does the article suggest as a way forward?
The authors call for greater collaboration between AI experts and healthcare professionals, rigorous testing and validation of AI algorithms, and crucially addressing bias in data used to train these algorithms.
It's a reminder that while AI holds incredible potential, we need to proceed with caution and ensure that ethical and safety considerations are paramount. Now, shifting gears, we have a commentary titled, "The Doctor Will Zoom You Now: Telemedicine in the Post-Pandemic World" by Jessica DeVito.
This piece reflects on the rise of telemedicine, which really took off during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, I remember that virtual appointments became the norm for a while. But now that the pandemic's urgency has subsided, what does the author see as the future of telemedicine?
DeVito acknowledges both the benefits and limitations of telemedicine. She highlights its potential for expanding access to healthcare, especially for people in rural or underserved areas.
It can definitely remove geographical barriers and make healthcare more accessible.
But she also cautions that telemedicine isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It may not be suitable for all medical conditions. And there are concerns about the potential for digital divides, where a lack of access to technology could create new healthcare disparities.
So it's about finding the right balance and ensuring equitable access. Makes sense. Moving on, we have a research article titled, "The Impact of Climate Change on Mental Health." A Global Perspective by Sarah Green and her fellow researchers.
This article tackles a growing concern: the mental health consequences of climate change.
We often hear about the physical impacts of climate change, but its effects on mental health are just as significant, aren't they?
Absolutely. This research explores the various ways climate change can impact mental well-being. Think about the trauma and stress caused by extreme weather events like floods or wildfires.
Those events can be devastating both physically and emotionally, but there are also less obvious ways climate change can affect mental health, right?
Yes, consider the anxiety and despair that can arise from the constant threat of climate change, or the displacement and loss of livelihoods caused by environmental degradation.
It's a multifaceted issue with long-term consequences. What does the research suggest we can do to address these mental health impacts?
The authors call for a multi-pronged approach that includes building community resilience, providing mental health support services in climate-affected areas, and, crucially, taking action to mitigate climate change itself.
So it's about both preparing for and preventing the mental health consequences. Now, for our next article, we have a fascinating case study titled "A Rare Complication After a Routine Vaccination" by Dr. Maria Rodriguez.
This case report highlights a rare but serious complication that occurred in a patient after receiving a routine vaccination.
Vaccine safety is always a topic of concern.
Oh.
Can you elaborate on this case?
The article describes a patient who developed a rare neurological condition, Guillain-Barré syndrome, shortly after receiving a flu vaccine. It's important to note that Guillain-Barré syndrome is a very rare condition, and the article emphasizes that the benefits of vaccination far outweigh the risks.
So this is a reminder that while vaccines are generally very safe, rare complications can occur. And it's essential to have systems in place to monitor and address these situations.
Exactly. The article underscores the importance of vigilant monitoring, reporting, and investigating any potential adverse events associated with vaccines. This allows for a better understanding of the safety profile and ensures public trust in vaccination programs.
Transparency and open communication are key. Our final article for this part of our deep dives is a thought-provoking piece by Dr. David Chen titled "The Ethics of Genetic Editing: A Balancing Act."
This commentary explores the complex ethical considerations surrounding genetic editing technologies like CRISPR.
Genetic editing is a revolutionary technology with the potential to cure diseases, but it also raises significant ethical concerns. What are some of the key ethical dilemmas this article highlights?
One major dilemma is the potential for unintended consequences. Genetic editing could inadvertently introduce new mutations or disrupt other genes, leading to unforeseen health problems.
It's like a domino effect. Changing one thing could have a ripple effect on other parts of the genome.
Another ethical concern is the potential for using genetic editing for non-therapeutic purposes, like enhancing traits or selecting for desirable characteristics. This raises concerns about designer babies and exacerbating existing social inequalities.
It's a slippery slope, and we need to be very careful about the ethical boundaries we set. What does the author suggest as a way forward?
Dr. Chen advocates for a cautious and balanced approach. He emphasizes the need for rigorous scientific research, open public dialogue, and robust ethical guidelines to govern the use of genetic editing technologies.
It's about finding the right balance between harnessing the potential of this technology for good while safeguarding against potential harm. We've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. Agatha, what are your reflections on these articles?
What's fascinating to me is the interconnectedness of these topics. We've seen how AI can revolutionize healthcare, but also the need to address bias and transparency. Telemedicine holds promise for accessibility, but raises concerns about digital divides. Climate change isn't just an environmental issue, but a mental health crisis in the making. And while vaccines are essential, we need to be vigilant about rare complications. Finally, genetic editing offers incredible potential, but demands careful ethical consideration. It's a reminder that progress in medicine and technology always comes with a responsibility to use these advancements wisely and ethically.
You've summed it up perfectly. It's all about finding that balance, isn't it?
We've got some important articles left to explore, starting with one that tackles a global health threat that's been on my radar for a while now: antimicrobial resistance.
That sounds a bit intimidating. Can you break it down for our listeners who might not be familiar with this term?
Of course. It's all about the bugs fighting back, so to speak. When we talk about antimicrobial resistance, we're talking about bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites that have evolved to the point where the medicines we used to rely on to kill them no longer work.
So the medicines are becoming ineffective. Why is that happening?
There are several reasons, but one of the biggest culprits is the overuse and misuse of antimicrobials, especially antibiotics. For example, Sometimes doctors prescribe antibiotics for viral infections like the common cold, even though antibiotics only work against bacteria.
So it's like using the wrong tool for the job.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of using antibiotics in agriculture to promote growth in livestock. This can lead to resistant bacteria developing in animals, which can then spread to humans.
So it's a multifaceted problem with serious implications. The article that caught my eye is titled "The Global Burden of Antimicrobial Resistance, a Looming Crisis." It's authored by Dr. Mark Johnson and his colleagues. What are they saying about the current state of this crisis?
They're painting a pretty grim picture. Stanley antimicrobial resistance is a global issue that's already responsible for a significant number of deaths each year. And the projections for the future are alarming. We could be heading towards a post-antibiotic era where common infections once easily treated become deadly threats.
That sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but it's a very real threat. What would happen if we lose our effective antibiotics?
Think about it. Surgeries, even routine ones, could become incredibly risky because we wouldn't be able to prevent infections. Organ transplants would become even more challenging. Even simple cuts and scrapes could become life-threatening.
That's terrifying. What can we do to avert this disaster?
The authors outline several key strategies. First and foremost, we need to promote responsible use of antimicrobials, both in healthcare and agriculture. Doctors need to be more cautious about prescribing antibiotics, and we need to explore alternatives to antibiotics in farming practices.
So it's about changing our behavior and finding new solutions.
Exactly. We also need to invest in research and development to create new antibiotics that can overcome resistance. And of course, raising public awareness is crucial. People need to understand the risks of antimicrobial resistance and the importance of using antibiotics responsibly.
It's a call to action for all of us. Now let's shift gears to a completely different topic: the healing power of art. This issue features a commentary by Dr. Emily Carter titled "Art as Therapy: The Healing Power of Creative Expression."
I love this one. It's a reminder that healing isn't always just about pills and procedures. Sometimes it's about tapping into our creativity and expressing ourselves in ways that go beyond words.
I'm intrigued. What are some of the ways that art can be therapeutic?
Dr. Carter highlights how engaging in creative activities like painting, writing music, or dance can provide a powerful outlet for processing emotions, reducing stress, and boosting self-esteem.
So it's about finding a healthy way to release pent-up emotions and cope with stress.
Exactly. And some research suggests that engaging in creative activities can even enhance cognitive function, improving memory and problem-solving skills.
It sounds like art can be beneficial for both our mental and physical well-being. Do you think it can replace traditional medical treatments?
Not necessarily. Dr. Carter emphasizes that art therapy can be a valuable tool, both as a standalone therapy and as a complementary approach alongside conventional medical treatments.
It's about finding what works best for each individual and embracing a holistic approach to health.
Precisely. Now, our final article for this deep dive takes us into the realm of aging and the impact of social isolation on cognitive decline. This research, led by Dr. Laura Peterson, focused specifically on older adults.
Social isolation is a growing concern, especially as our population ages. What did this research reveal about the link between social isolation and cognitive health?
The findings were quite striking. The study found a strong correlation between social isolation and an increased risk of cognitive decline, including problems with memory, thinking, and even dementia.
So our social connections are not only important for our emotional well-being, but also for our brain health.
Exactly. The researchers suggest that social interaction helps keep our brains active and engaged, which may offer some protection against cognitive decline. Think about it. When we engage in conversations, share stories, or participate in activities with others, we're constantly challenging our brains and keeping those neural pathways firing.
It's a reminder that staying socially connected throughout our lives is crucial for both our mental and physical health. Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive into this issue of The Lancet. It's been an incredible journey through the latest advancements and challenges in medicine and global health. What are your final takeaways?
It's been an eye-opening experience. From the potential of preventing rheumatoid arthritis to the looming threat of antimicrobial resistance, from the healing power of art to the importance of social connections, this issue has reminded us that the pursuit of health and well-being is a complex and multifaceted endeavor. There's so much to learn and so much work to be done to ensure a healthier future for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. It's been a privilege to explore these important topics with you, and I hope our listeners have found this deep dive informative and inspiring. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those critical questions.